Hello guys, this is Paul McWhorter with TopTechBoy.com, and we're here today with episode number 111 in our incredible new tutorial series where you are unleashing the power of your Raspberry Pi Pico W. What I will need you to do is pour yourself a nice tall glass of ice cold coffee. That would be straight up black coffee, poured over ice, no sugar, no sweeteners, none needed. And as you're pouring your coffee, as always, I want to give a shout out to our friends over at Sunfounder. Sunfounder is actually sponsoring this most excellent series of video lessons. And in this class, we will be using the Kepler kit for Raspberry Pi Pico W. Now, hopefully most of you guys already have your gear, but if you don't, take a look down in the description. There is a link over to Amazon and you can hop on over there and pick your kit up. And believe me, your life and my life are going to be a whole lot simpler if we are working on identical hardware. But enough of this shameless self-promotion. Let's jump in and talk about what I am going to teach you today. And what I'm going to teach you is the essentials of a very important Python package, which is called PyQt. Now I'm going to kind of teach you the essential elements of PyQt today, and you're going to see that it is a very, very powerful tool to add to your Python tool set. Now, what does it do? It makes it easy for you to generate a nice widget in Python, a graphical user interface in Python that has buttons, radio buttons, slider bars, pull down menus, checkboxes, all of those useful features that allow you to interact with your project. Now let's think of what we've just done in this class. We've gotten to the point that on our Raspberry Pi Pico W, we can build almost anything with that, with all the cool components that we have. And last week, we set up a client-server relationship between our Raspberry Pi Pico W and our Python program running on our desktop. And now what would be really cool would be to have a GUI, a widget in Python on our desktop that allowed us to graphically interface with our Pi Pico project over Wi-Fi. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. But in order to do that, you've got to learn the basics of PyQt. So that's what we're going to do today. So I'm going to get out of your way. I'm going to have a little sip of coffee. And we're going to fire up Thonny. Okay, we're going to fire up Thonny. So here we are. Now, the first thing I want you to see, I got to get way out of the way, is I am not going to connect to the Raspberry Pi Pico W. I am going to connect to my local Python. Okay, so when you install Thonny, it installs Python with it. So with Thonny, I can run Python on the desktop. So if I come over here and say, hello, say print hello world, like that, it prints hello world. And I'm not even connected to the Pico. It's just running Python. It is just running Python on your desktop machine now. Okay, so you know a lot about Python already, but now if you want to run PyQt, we need to install it. So you come over here to Tools and Manage Packages. And what you want to do is you want to install PyQt. I think it's I don't think it matters, but it's PyQt and then 5 like that. I don't think the capitalization matters, so let's see if it finds it. This is always the moment of truth. There it is, PyQt 5. So you need to select that, and then you need to install it. You can imagine, since I've been working the last 2 or 3 days with PyQt, mine is already installed. So I am good to go. So let's see if we can come in, and let's see if we can get some of just a quick little demonstration of what do I want to do to start with. I want to generate a widget. Inside that widget, I want to have a window, like a box inside of the widget. And then what I want to have is I want to have one button. And then when I press that button, I want something to happen. Well, if I could add one button, I could add 10 buttons, right? And if I could add a button, I could add a slider bar. So a lot of the mentality, a lot of the structure of PyQt 5 you're going to be able to learn just by writing this first simple program. Then we'll add some stuff and add some stuff and add some stuff, and then I will give you a homework assignment. So this does require us to import the system library, because there'll be a system command in here somewhere. So we'll just do that. And now from Pi, and you got to do this exactly right with capitalization, PyQt 5 dot. Let me do a little window management here, if you would be patient. Okay, I'm gonna, from PyQt 5 dot Qt widgets, I'm going to import them all. Import star. So that goes out and it imports all the different widgets. Now, some people like to import the widget by widget, the widgets you're going to be using, but I'm just going to import them all. And that way I don't have to come back and, as I'm adding new and different widgets, have to update this line of code. Now, also from PyQt 5, what we want to .qt core. So this is the core program, not the fancy graphics, but the kind of core engine that's keeping track of everything. From that, we want to import Qt like that. So those are going to be the libraries that we're going to be using, and we'll get rid of that. Doesn't count as an error if you catch it before you run it. Then just for good measure, let's import time. Yeah, let's import time like that. All right, now, what do I want to do? There's just some things that I am going to have to do in order to get this, kind of framework set up. So to get the PyQt framework set up, I'm going to create an object. I'm going to create just my app. This is the app I'm going to be working with as we write this program. And that app is going to be Q application, and then we're going to pass it the system argv. This is not something we do. You don't have to worry about what system argv is. It just, you have to put it in there. Okay, but it's not something that really has in any way pertains to what we're going to be doing in this program. But you got to set up your app, and this is how you do it. Now, I have an app. What am I trying to do? I'm going to try to create a GUI window on my screen. So what do I want to do? I want to create a window. And that window is going to be equal to, this window is an object. I could call it, I could call it whatever I wanted to call it, but I'm just going to call it window. So when I want to interact with that object, I interact with the name window. And what that is going to be is, it is going to be my widget, QWidget. All right, so what have we done? We've kind of fired up our application. We've created our application object. Now I've created my window object, which is a widget. Okay, the widget is kind of like the whole thing. All right, now I want to put a title on it. So I'm going to say window that I just created dot set window title, and that is going to be equal, that's going to be, what do I want to make that? My grand widget, like that. Okay, now I don't know if this would actually create a box at this point or not, but what we would have to do down here is, this is like a lot of things. Once you do all of your building, then you've got to show what you created, okay? And then I'm going to do, and this is kind of what ends the program, sys.exit, and then app.execute. Like this and like that and like that. All right. Now all the action is going to come between these two things. All the action is going to come between those two things. I might have to do one more thing. Before I could actually run this. Yeah, I set the title. I need to tell it how big I want it to be. So now I'm going to say window.set geometry, set geometry, and then what's it going to be? Well, where do you want the corner of your widget in X and Y? Well, if you think of the top left of your screen is 0, 0, I want to come over 100 pixels and go down 100 pixels. So that would be 100, 100, because I don't want it crammed up in the corner. That's kind of awkward. And then it's again X and Y. How wide do I want it? 800 pixels and then 600 pixels tall. All right. And now, I don't know, would this generate a widget at this point? Let's see. I don't know. One thing is we just want to make sure we don't have any errors. Okay, Q widget is not defined. So what did I do wrong there in line 7? I probably did a capitalization Q, uppercase W, Q widget. Okay. And now look at this. I've got a widget. It's my grand widget. And what does it do? Absolutely nothing. But when I write a program like this, I like to kind of do the top and the bottom, and then you sort of got the widget there to work with, and it's popping up. Now let's start building the stuff inside. Okay, let's start building the stuff inside. So I have a window. But what do I need in that window? I need some sort of box in there that I can build things in. So inside the window, I'm going to create a widget box. Now, again, I'm calling it widget box. You could call it, you know, Charlene's box, okay? You could call it whatever you wanted, but I'm going to call mine widget box, and I'll put my widgets where? In the widget box. Now, how do I create a widget box? I'm going to say it is Q. Okay, that's, you know, kind of the whole thing, QT. It's going to be a Q. And then you got to decide, as you add the widgets, do you want them to kind of just stack vertically like this? Or if I start adding widgets, do you want them to add horizontally? I want them to kind of stack up vertically. So I'm going to put a V for vertical, and then box layout. And what am I creating a box layout for? My window, right? So now the widget box is inside the what? So you got to see that it's kind of like an onion with layers. At the top level, we have the window. And now inside the window, we have the next layer down, which is my widget box. And when I add things to my widget box, I want them to stack vertically. Okay? Is that making sense? I hope it does. Now, what I want is, I want to add 4 buttons, okay? But I'm going to add stuff besides buttons, and so I don't want it to go like, I could just add button, 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 button. If I just added the buttons, they would add on top of each other kind of vertically, but I want these buttons to go across the screen. So I need what? I need another box, okay? I need another box. So I'm going to build button box. Okay, and button box is going to be Q, and this time I want the button box to be horizontal, and then it is box, and then it is layout. And I'll tell it later where to put it, but right now I'm just creating the button box to put things in. And the button box will go inside of the widget box. Okay, and so what am I going to do? I should probably go ahead and do that. And so down here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that I have got my widget box, right? And to my widget box, I'm going to add layout. And what am I going to add to my widget box? I'm going to add button box. Okay, now let's think about it. I've got the window, and then I create a widget box inside of the window. And then I create a button box, and then I'm going to put that button box inside the widget box. So I've got window, I've got widget box, and then I've got button box. Now I can put things in the button box. So you see I've kind of gotten 3 layers. But you see the key is that your outside highest level box, you just put it in the window. That's my widget box. And now if I want a box in a box, I have to take that widget box and I have to add to that the box that I want, button box. See, I got window, widget box, and now button box. So you see, this is, again, I'm kind of doing it at a very high level. Let's see if that'll run. I don't know if that'll run or not. Yeah, okay. Now, you don't see the button box because there's nothing in it. Okay, it's empty, but I've got the framework and it is working. Okay, so now let's see if I can create a button now. Okay, let's see if I can create a button. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how we can make one button. So after we got all the button stuff done, it's really pretty easy. Man, as I'm talking, this sounds complicated, but really it's very logical. And all your programs are going to kind of have this framework. So it's not like you got to memorize a lot of stuff. It's almost like you would start with this as your framework. This is the kind of skeleton of your program. And then you're going to be able to make it sing and dance. But you don't have to think, oh, well, why did I do Q, V, H, all that? It's like, this is kind of setting you up a basic widget, and then you can go in a basic GUI, a basic widget box, and then you're going to go in and you're going to put cool stuff in here. So I've got a button box. Let me put something in it. I'm going to put a green button. So this is my object called green button. What is it? It is a Q push button. Okay, it's going to need a label. And so what am I going to label it? Green button. All right. So when that green button, right now, it doesn't have a color. It's just called green button. It's labeled green button, but it doesn't have a button. What does it know? It knows that it is a push button. Okay. Now we've got to kind of tell it some stuff. We got to set some parameters on it. And I am having a little bit of trouble here with Windows management. Okay, so what do we know about the green button? Well, we want to set some parameters. So I'm going to set a style sheet. All right. And what that style sheet is going to be, the background color is going to be green. Okay, the color of the box is going to be what? It's going to be white. So I want a green background, and then it'll have white text on it. And then you've got to end that with a colon, and then like this and like this. So I've created a green button, and it knows that it is a push button. It is going to have the label green button, and then it is going to have a background color of green, and it's going to have a color of white on the text. Now, what does the button do? What does the button do? the button is going to green button. What does it do when it is clicked? What does it do when it is clicked? We got to tell it what to do when it is clicked. It is going to connect. And what is it going to connect? Green button pressed. All right. So when you click that green button, it's going to run up and it is going to run green button pressed. Now, what is our problem at this point? We don't have a green button pressed. So let's come up here and let's define green button pressed. Okay. And then what do I want to do when the green button is pressed? Well, you could, launch a thermonuclear warhead if you wanted to, or as a starter, what we could do is something simple that just shows that our program flow is working, and we could say green button clicked. Like that. Okay, so that's what it's going to do. All right, so now I've got all of that. I've got it all defined. Okay, and then I have the just making sure I've done everything. Okay, widget box, I've added the button. So I've added the buttons to, now where did I add green button? Okay, yeah, now what I got to do is I created green button, but I've got to what? Button box. The button box, I have to add the widget. What? Green button. All right. Do you see how the layers of the onion are starting to kind of make sense? Just like I had to add to my widget box, I had to add to my widget box the button box, okay, by adding layout. Now my button box, I'm going to add what? I'm not going to add another box. I'm going to add a widget. What is the widget? Green button. But do you see there's like a very natural symmetry to this? Are you guys seeing that? Okay, are you guys seeing that? All right, let's see if this thing will run now. Okay, green button. Where is that line 19? I didn't capitalize correctly. Green button. Now let's run this thing. Okay. And look at that. All right. So here would be my widget. Here's my window, right? Here's my window. Inside my window is a widget box. Inside the widget box is a button box. And inside the button box is exactly what? It is exactly one button. Now, the moment of truth, does it do anything if I press the button? And I press the button and boom, green button clicked. Okay, green button clicked. And so that is really, really, really amazing, because you see, we have all the connections now. We have this framework, and I'm hoping that you see that the framework really does make a lot of sense. You create a window, then you say what size the window, what size you want the window to be. Then inside your window, you create your widget box, and then you create a button box, and then you put a button in the button box, and then you add the button box to the widget box, and then you show, and then you sort of talk about starting the whole wheel spinning, and then this sort of also lets you stop it. So this is kind of a command that does a start and a stop. But you see, it is still running. Well, I think I killed it, but let's run it again. And Okay, like that. And you see I'm not getting the little Python shell coming up, which means the program continues to run and continues to look for user input. So that is pretty good. All right, now if we can create a green button, what else can we create? Let's do this. So I'm just going to copy this and I'm going to do this. And then let's create a yellow button, okay? So I'm going to go Y-E-L-L-O-W, and that's long enough. I think I'm going to copy that, okay? So this is going to then be titled yellow button, and then I'm going to have yellow. And now background color, would I want it green? No, I would want it what? Yellow. Then also white text on yellow doesn't really show up, so let's go ahead and make this one black on white. All right, now green button is going to be yellow button. And now do I want to go up and click the, do I want to run green button press? No, I want to run yellow button press. That was an embarrassing paste that I just did. That was terrible. So yellow button pressed. Well, if I'm going to run yellow button press, I better what? I better define yellow button press. And then I'm going to say yellow button clicked. Okay, so now let's see now. Okay, I gotta check things here. So I've done yellow button. That's good. So what did I do? I did the what did I forget to do here? Add yellow button. All right, so now that should be the same. Now I should have two buttons inside my button box, which is inside my widget box, which is inside my window. So if I press green, green button clicked. If I pressed yellow, yellow button clicked. All right. Now, there's commands that you could give to put every little widget exactly where you want it. But if you just use this horizontal and vertical thing that I've shown you, we can kind of get things where we want them. And I'll show you that as we go on. Okay, I'll show you that as we go on. Now, if we have a green and a yellow, what we're also going to want is, I'm going to copy this, and what we're going to want is we are going to want a red. I'll do the top part in a minute, but let's just do all of this. Okay, let's do all of this down here. Let's do all of this down here. And then this is going to be red. And then the color is going to be red. And then the color of the text, again, white looks good on red, so we'll say white. And then what will this do? This will be red button pressed. And then what do we want to add to our button box? We want to add the widget red button that we just created. All right, I got to go do the function up there, but while we're down here on a roll, what I want to also add here is the off button. So this is going to be an off. Okay, and so then this will be the off button, the off button. We're going to add the off button to the button box, and then we're going to need a function. Okay, and then this is going to be the off button. And then on this one, let's make it a black button, and then let's make the color white, the color of the text. All right, now we got to come up here and build some of these things, right? So let's take this, let's paste it, and this is going to be the red button. This will be the red button pressed. This will be the off button, and this will be the off button clicked. Okay, so now let's run it. And look at that. And we've got green button, yellow button, red button, and off button. Okay, you see how now all of those functions up there, we could do like really, really neat things with them, powerful things, but we're just trying to get kind of our program flow going at this point. Okay, so what if we wanted this up at the top instead of down here? If we wanted it up at the top instead of down there, what I could do is I could kind of say to, let's see, down here, I've got my widget box. I've got my widget box show. I've got my widget box. There's one other thing that I should do here that I didn't do before the window show. I did the add. Okay, I think there is one other thing that I need to do. So I do the window show. I add the button box. Okay, but what I also need to do is I need to do a widget dot set layout. So what I never did was I never added the widget box to the overall layout. So this is just saying, right, I've been very careful about building the widget box, and inside the widget box is the button box, but I didn't actually define the widget box as the overall, you know, the overall layout for what I'm doing. So this does need to be in there, even though it was running without it. So let's see what happens. Widget not found. Okay, did I call that something different? Window. Oh, it's not widget. It is my window. All right. So at the high level, the window, which widget is it going to, you know, which layout is it going to use? It's going to use the layout for the widget box. So now let's try that. Okay. So that's just important to make that connection, even though for some reason it ran without it. So green button, yellow, red, off. Okay. Now I'd like to sort of see if I can move that up to the top. I would like to see if I could move that up to the top. So what I want to do is, before I set the layout, so I put my button box in, and now what I want to do is I want to do a widget box dot add stretch. Like that. So, okay, I put button box in, and button box didn't fill the window, so it went to the middle. So I'm going to add this invisible thing that's going to push then the button box up to the top, if I'm thinking about it right. Okay, yeah. See, I like that. All right, do you see that? And that is all working. Okay, see, that's all doing good stuff there. So I got a little tripped up there, but hopefully it makes sense. To my widget box, I am adding the button box. And then to the button box, I had already added the buttons. And then what am I doing? I am adding below the button box just an arbitrary push to sort of push the thing up there, to push the button box up to the top. And now I'm going to tell it for my overall window, I'm going to have the widget box. So I've got window, widget box, button box, and then buttons. So sort of like 4 layers to the onion. And that is all working now. Now what you can imagine is up here is where most of your old-fashioned Python program is going to be. It's the code that you want executed based on which button was pressed. All right. Now I'm going to do another one. Okay, let's do a slider bar, because that's just a completely new, widget. So we're going to come down, we're going to do all of this stuff, all of our widgets we've created, right? All of our widgets we've created, but now before I'd this is sort of like the wrap up, the sort of, I built all the little boxes and now I'm stacking them together. But before I do that, I'm going to add another widget, and it's going to be a slider. And the slider is going to be Q push button? No, Q slider. So I'm creating a slider. And now what kind of slider do I want? A QT. Do I want it vertical or do I want it horizontal? I'm going to make it horizontal, like that. So I've created it. Now on this slider, you're going to slide it between two different values. So what is the set minimum? I want that to be a 1. All right. Now it'll slide from 1 to set maximum, and that needs to be 40. Okay. Now the thing is that it's got to be an integer. You can't go from 1.1 to 2.5. It's got to be an integer. And then where do you want it to start? You set value so that when the widget pops up, what value is the slider going to have? Let's set it at 10, like that. Okay. Now also the slider needs to have a set tick position, and the Q slider, right? The Q slider dot what? I want the ticks below the slider. You can imagine you could do ticks above the slider, and then the slider dot set tick interval. Let's set it every 5. We'll put another tick like it. 5, 10, 15, 20. Okay, does that make sense? Now, what do we do? So remember up here, like you said, when the button is clicked, what do you do? Well, you don't click a slider, right? But the slider, when you change the value, so on slider value changed, what do you want to do? You want to run the function slider value changed. You can call this whatever you want, right? But that is going to be a function that we're going to have to define in a minute. And then what do I want to do? Well, my widget box, I want to what? Now, I'm not putting this in the button box because it's not a button. You know, like the button widget went in a button box, which was in the widget box. But the slider, I'm not going to put in a box. I'm going to put it all the way up in the widget box. So the widget box dot add widget, which widget? The slider, like that. Does this kind of starting to like really make a lot of sense? Now, you're not going to like memorize these things, right? But you'll kind of start with a basic set, and then it's very, very easy to go back and look at this program and then kind of make it do whatever you want it to do, because I think it's very logical in the way it fits together. Okay, so now we got to come up here in all these functions, and now I need to define, not that, what did I call that silly thing? Slider value changed. Okay. And then what would I want to say there? I want to say, I think I might do a little bit more here just to kind of show that you can. You see, what I really wanted was, I really wanted it to be frequency, and I wanted it to kind of do a frequency between 0.1 and 40. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say the frequency is equal to the value divided by 10, okay? And what was the value? The value is what, where you left the little bar. So you get a value back from this thing when you move it. And now what are you going to do with that value? Well, I really wanted to go from 0.1 to 40, but you got to go integer from 0.1 to 4, but you got to use integers. And so I went from 1 to 40, and then I'm going to take the value off the slider bar, and I am going to divide by 10. Okay, now I'm going to do a slider label, okay, and I'm going to set text, and that text is going to be frequency, and then it is going to be comma or plus concatenated with frequency, okay, and then concatenate that with space HZ. So I'm giving like a label up there, okay, I'm giving it a label, and now what am I going to do? I'm going to print frequency and then comma frequency, like that. Okay, I think that should give us a slider bar. I think that should give us a slider bar. And maybe it will label the slider bar. I'm not exactly sure about this label, if I have to do something to get it to show, but let's just see what happens if I do this. At line 16, that's a quote. I need that quote right there. Right now we're going to run it. Q slider is not defined. I bet I didn't capitalize it, right? Yeah, they're using a little different way of doing things. Q uppercase S, okay? So let's do that. QT signal is not called in 53 signal. Okay, what is that about? All right, I've got down here with my slider. It's horizontal, it's 1, it's 40, it's 10. It goes ticks below, then slider value changed, slider dot value changed. Analogously, what do? The dot connect, just like this. So when it's clicked, I connect to off button. When the value change, I connect to the slider value changed. Okay, look at this. Look at this. Now look at that, all right? Now what happens? Okay, value is not defined. So how do I get that value up there? How do I get the value up there? Okay, I see. So what I've got to do here is I've got to give it the variable. So it's you know, that interrupt grabs the value off, grabs the number off the slider, and it's passing it to that called function. But I got to tell the called function how to grab it. So I'm going to grab it as val. Well, now the function knows what val is, and so then that val can be put here. Okay, so this one has a parameter. You have to pass it to the function, and that's the part that I missed. Right, so now we come here, and we get this, and then we get this. Okay, and slider label is not defined. So what is that? Slider label dot text. Okay, I think to do that, so I've slider label dot set text, and then I've given it a frequency. So I've kind of in here defined a label, but then what I've got to do is I've got to sort of use that label. I've got to do some more things to use that label. All right, so what do I need to do for that? All right, so I hadn't really put myself in a position to use that label. So what I've got to do is I've kind of got to do the label part of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say slider label is equal to Q label, and then it's going to be frequency, and this will be the start value is 1.0 hertz. So I'm just creating a label, and right, we started at 1 hertz, so I'm making the label to say 1 hertz. But what's going to happen to that slider label? The slider label is going to have its text changed up here. So I'm just creating the object slider label with the correct first thing. Now this has nothing necessarily to do with the slider. It's just creating a label that I'm calling slider label, and it's tied to the slider right here, because that is where I change it. All right, so that makes sense. Makes sense why it didn't do it. So I set that up, and then the slider dot set alignment is going to be qt dot align center, like that. Okay, now slider label, the object that I just created, I'm going to set a style sheet, and then what I want is font size is 24 pixels, and then I want the padding around it, I want space around it, padding of 2 pixels, like that, and like in the quote. And you've got to have this trailing semicolon that's a little bit strange. Let's see what happens here, all right? Slider is not defined, and that was not there. Slider is not defined in line 48. Slider dot label. All right, let's go. Slider silder. Okay, so where is that in line 49? Man, my typing is horrible today. Slider dot label. So here we go. And we've got this. Okay, and now we have frequency is not defined. Okay, line 16, let's fix that. Getting a lot of typos in here. 16, frequency, I didn't spell right there. I think that's the problem. So now we're going to run it. Okay, so now I've got a slider. Can't be a string. Line 16 cannot be a, didn't like line 16. So this, I'm concatenating a number that has to be made a string, right? To concatenate, you have to have strings. So this is a string plus a string plus a string. That should work. Okay, so now let's see if the slider bar works. Okay, you see as I move it, I'm changing the frequency from 0.1 to 4, but it started where it started at 1. Like that, okay? And then the button, all that works. All right, now the thing to see though is I created this really cool label I've created this really cool label, but the label doesn't show up. The label doesn't show up in my box. Now, why does the label not show up? Because I created it, but I didn't what? I didn't add it. So what I got to do is widget box dot add widget and then slider label. Okay, so what am I adding? I'm adding to the widget box. I'm not adding to the button box. I'm dot add widget slider label. And then we would expect that to be above the slider. Okay, so now let's see what happens. And now look at this. I have a frequency of 1 where it started. I can change the frequency, right? I can change this frequency. I can see it changing here, and then I can see it changing here. Okay, so all of that is working, and then the buttons are working, all right? The buttons are working. Everything is working well together. Now, what if I wanted the label below it? Well, I wonder if I could just cut all this and put it afterwards here like this, and then would it stack below it? Would the label stack below? Okay, now the label is below the slider bar. Okay, now I wonder even like if we wanted the buttons on top. Okay, let's just do an experiment. All right, so let's do an experiment. What if we did the ads down here? So I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna cut it and I'm gonna put it here. Okay, I'm going to cut this and I'm gonna put it here. Now you've got to do the putting them after you've made them, right? I couldn't put something in the box before I made it. But now what this is saying is the slider is going to be at the top, and then I'm going to have the slider label, and then this one I didn't want to move the off button, so let me undo that. That was wrong. What I wanted to do was I wanted to move the button box itself. So where did I add that button box to the widget? Here. No, that's adding button box green. Okay. Where did I put the button box? So I'm adding green button to button box. I'm adding yellow button to button box. I'm adding red button to button box. But where did I add box? Let me see if I can find that. There should be somewhere an add box like that. You guys tell me, where did I do that? Slider, 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 slider. Add widget slider. Okay, here it is. These are the things that I'm adding. Okay, it was right below. Okay, so what I've done is I've added the slider, and then I've added the label, and then I've added the button box, and then I've added the stretch. Okay, so you see we could build all the things up at the top, and then we could order them here like this. And so what do I have at the top? I have the slider, I have the frequency, and I have the buttons. But now what I want to do is I want to put the buttons on the top. So what I can do is I can do this. So you just got to kind of think about how you want to structure your code, right? And so what do I have? I've got the buttons and then the slider and then the frequency. Now here it would be easy to click that button while I'm trying to grab the slider. And so what I think is I would want the slider label. I would want the slider label like this. Okay. Yeah, so you see now I can grab that slider without accidentally hitting one of those buttons. All right, do you see the power of this? And I got a little tripped up a couple of times, but you want to kind of be structured. And what you might want to say is, well, every time that I build an object, every time that I build an object or a widget, I should then add it to either the widget box or add it to a different box. I kind of like to build everything in here in one place, then stack them up in the order that I want them. And so I kind of like doing it this way. And then remember also that we have this widget box add stretch. Well, what happens if we didn't have that? What would it look like if we didn't have that in there? Then things will probably kind of float off in the, yeah, so you see what happens when we don't do that is then it decides to add the blank space around the frequency. It decides to add the blank space around the frequency. So I like to stack my stuff up, and then I like to add that add stretch so that it kind of presses everything up at the top. Okay. All right, guys, does that make sense? I hope I didn't make that too confusing, but I think if you go back and look at this code, I really, really, really think that it is going to make a lot of sense, that it's very logical. Now, this is where your real action is going to happen. This is where you're going to be writing all of your code, that all of this other stuff is setting things up. So we sort of set up our app, we set up our window, we give it a title, where do we want the window, and then inside the window, we are going to create a widget box. We want the widget, and then we're going to create a button box also, and then we're just going in and putting widgets in the button box or widget in the widget box, and then stacking them in the window in the order that we want. And so I think it's really, really very logical. I think it is very, very logical. Okay, now this is what your homework assignment is. This is what your homework assignment is. So what I want you to see is not that. Well, you can see the river. There's a boat back over. I can't ever point the right way back over there, but it's gone now. Okay, so what do we want? What we want is we want you to write a program for next week. Okay, we want you to write a program for next week. And I got to make sure that I am doing the right thing here. Okay, so what is your program going to look like? It is going to look like this. All right, do you see that? That looks pretty easy right now. How hard could the homework be? But I want you over here to look at the Raspberry Pi Pico W. Untethered. Completely untethered. Okay. Now, what do we want to happen? When I press green button, boom, the green LED comes on. When I press yellow button, the yellow LED comes on. When I press red button, the red LED comes on. When I press off, everything goes off. And look at this. Look at this. Green, yellow, red. Untethered. Untethered. Is that pretty cool? Now, you know, LEDs are not that exciting, but I want you to see that we are passing data from Python being caught on a Raspberry Pi Pico W. Raspberry Pi Pico W does something and then passes a response back. And in fact, I might be able to show you that if I showed you the actual program here, Let me show you that. Well, I'm not going to show you the actual program. I'm just going to show you the Thonny window because you got to write the program yourself, okay? But you see over here on the Python side, it is reporting back to the main Python program what it did as it does it down here. Now, do you see how exciting this is? Is that I've got communication from Python to the board, from the board to the components, and then from the components back to the board back to Python. And then I am not interacting with some thorny, changing code, but I'm interacting with my project through a GUI. Now, if I can do these 4 buttons, I could do 20 buttons. If I can set parameters with this, I could set parameters with all types of different things. Now, there are 20 different types of GUIs that you can put. There are 20 different types of widgets that you can put in this widget box that we made, but they all work pretty much the same, right? I showed you a button, I showed you a label, and I showed you a slider. There are also radio buttons. There are also check mark boxes. There are also drop-down menus. But all of those things are just kind of like you make the little widget and then you put the widget where you want it, either in the widget box or in a sub box. And you see, it's just like, if you can understand what we did today, then you can pretty much do anything. Now, as the class goes on, we'll be adding new widgets as we go, and we'll be adding new features to this thing. But for right now, you sort of see what the basic framework is. And so what your homework assignment is to bring your little widget to life by having it control what is happening on your Raspberry Pi Pico W. Okay, guys, I hope you're having as much fun taking these classes as I am making them. As always, at this point, I want to give a great big shout out to you guys who are standing with me on Patreon. When I get into these detailed classes like this, I don't get millions of views. I get a few thousand views. And therefore, the only way I can continue to make this level of content is through the support from you Patreons. So I want to thank you for standing with me. You can also help the channel by giving this video a thumbs up and leaving a comment down below. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, and when you do, make sure that you ring that bell so you'll get notification when future lessons drop. And most importantly, share this video with other people, because the world needs more people doing engineering and fewer people sitting around watching silly cat videos. Paul McWhorter with TopTechBoy.com. I will talk to you guys later.